Introduction to Psychology. Psychology is the scientific study of mind and behavior, encompassing a vast array of topics from perception and cognition to emotion and social interactions. It seeks to understand why individuals think, feel, and act the way they do, employing systematic observation and experimentation. This field is not merely about understanding mental illness, but also about exploring human potential and well-being. Psychologists apply their knowledge in diverse settings, including clinical practice, research, education, and organizational development. The ultimate goal is to describe, explain, predict, and ultimately influence behavior for the betterment of individuals and society. It is a dynamic discipline, constantly evolving, with new discoveries and methodologies. The origins of psychology can be traced back to ancient philosophical inquiries into the nature of the mind and soul, but its emergence as a distinct scientific discipline is relatively recent. Wilhelm Wundt established the first psychology laboratory in Leipzig, Germany, in 1879, marking a pivotal moment in its history. This event is often considered the formal birth of modern psychology, shifting its focus from philosophical speculation to empirical investigation. Early psychologists sought to break down mental processes into their most basic components, much like chemists analyze elements. This scientific approach laid the groundwork for the diverse theoretical perspectives that would follow. Historical roots of psychology. Before its formal establishment, psychology's roots were deeply embedded in philosophy and physiology, with thinkers like Plato and Aristotle pondering the nature of the mind. Philosophers debated concepts such as consciousness, memory, and free will for centuries, laying conceptual groundwork. Physiologists, on the other hand, investigated the biological mechanisms underlying mental processes, such as the nervous system and sensory organs. This dual heritage provided both the theoretical questions and the empirical methods that would eventually converge. The transition from philosophical inquiry to scientific study was gradual, marked by increasing emphasis on empirical evidence and systematic observation. Early philosophical discussions often lacked the rigorous experimental approach characteristic of modern psychology. Key figures like René Descartes introduced the concept of mind-body dualism, suggesting the mind and body are distinct entities that interact. John Locke and other empiricists argued that knowledge is primarily derived from sensory experience, emphasizing the role of environment. These philosophical debates provided a rich intellectual context for the emerging science of psychology. Later, physiologists like Hermann von Helmholtz conducted groundbreaking research on sensation and perception, demonstrating that mental processes could be measured and studied scientifically. Their work helped bridge the gap between abstract philosophical ideas and concrete empirical investigation, paving the way for Wundt's laboratory. Major schools of thought. Structuralism. Structuralism, pioneered by Wilhelm Wundt and his student Edward Titchener, was the first school of thought in psychology. It focused on breaking down mental processes into their most basic components, much like chemists analyze elements. The primary method used was introspection, where trained subjects would report their sensations, feelings, and images in response to stimuli. For example, participants might describe the raw sensory experience of seeing an apple, rather than simply identifying it as an apple. The goal was to identify the fundamental structures of conscious experience. This approach sought to create a periodic table of the mind, identifying the elemental building blocks of consciousness. Structuralists believed that understanding these basic elements was crucial to understanding the mind as a whole. While structuralism was foundational, it faced significant criticism, particularly regarding its reliance on introspection. Critics argued that introspection was subjective, unreliable, and varied greatly from person to person. It was also difficult to study complex mental processes, such as learning or problem-solving, using this method. The approach was also limited in its ability to study children, animals, or individuals with mental disorders who could not reliably introspect. Despite its limitations, structuralism's emphasis on systematic observation and the scientific study of consciousness laid important groundwork. It demonstrated that mental processes could indeed be studied empirically, setting the stage for future psychological schools. Major schools of thought. Functionalism. Functionalism emerged as a reaction to structuralism, shifting the focus from the what of consciousness to the why and how. Influenced by Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, functionalists, most notably William James, were interested in the purpose or function of mental processes and behavior. They asked, what is the adaptive value of consciousness and behavior? Rather than breaking down the mind into static elements, functionalists viewed the mind as a dynamic, flowing stream of consciousness that helps individuals adapt to their environment. They believed that mental states and behaviors serve a purpose in helping an organism survive and thrive. This perspective emphasized the practical applications of psychology. Functionalism broadened the scope of psychological study beyond introspection, incorporating observational methods and comparative psychology. They studied how mental processes like memory, perception, and emotion helped organisms adapt to their surroundings. This approach led to the development of applied psychology, including educational psychology and industrial organizational psychology. Functionalists were interested in individual differences and how these differences contributed to adaptation. While functionalism eventually gave way to other schools, its emphasis on the adaptive nature of behavior and the practical applications of psychology had a lasting impact on the field, influencing behaviorism and cognitive psychology. Major schools of thought. Behaviorism. Behaviorism, championed by psychologists like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner, emerged in the early 20th century as a radical departure from previous schools of thought. It argued that psychology should be an objective science focused solely on observable behavior, rejecting the study of unobservable mental states like consciousness. Behaviorists believed that all behavior, both human and animal, is learned through interaction with the environment. They emphasized the role of conditioning, classical and operant, in shaping responses. According to behaviorism, the mind is a black box that cannot be directly studied, and therefore, psychologists should only analyze stimuli and responses. This perspective sought to establish psychology as a truly empirical and predictive science. Key concepts in behaviorism include classical conditioning, demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov's experiments with dogs, where a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a natural response. Operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner, focuses on how consequences, rewards, and punishments shape voluntary behaviors. Behaviorism had a profound impact on psychology, particularly in therapy, example behavior modification, and education. However, it was criticized for its deterministic view of human nature and its neglect of internal mental processes. Despite these criticisms, behaviorism's rigorous methodology and emphasis on observable data significantly influenced psychological research and practice, contributing to a more scientific approach. Major schools of thought. Psychodynamic. The psychodynamic perspective, most famously associated with Sigmund Freud, revolutionized the understanding of the human mind by emphasizing the role of unconscious processes. Freud proposed that much of our mental life, including thoughts, feelings, and motives, operates outside of conscious awareness. He introduced concepts like the id, ego, and superego to describe the conflicting forces within the psyche. According to Freud, early childhood experiences and unresolved conflicts significantly shape adult personality and behavior. He believed that psychological problems often stem from repressed memories and desires. This school of thought posits that understanding these unconscious dynamics is key to resolving psychological distress. Freud developed psychoanalysis as a therapeutic technique to bring unconscious conflicts into conscious awareness, using methods such as dream analysis, free association, and the interpretation of slips of the tongue. While highly influential, psychodynamic theory has faced criticism for its lack of empirical testability and its focus on retrospective analysis rather than observable behavior. Critics also point to its limited generalizability and the difficulty in scientifically validating its core concepts. Despite these criticisms, Freud's ideas profoundly impacted not only psychology, but also Western culture, art, and literature, introducing the enduring notion of the unconscious mind and its powerful influence on human experience. Major schools of thought. Humanistic. Humanistic psychology emerged in the mid-20th century as a third force in psychology, offering an alternative to both psychodynamic theory and behaviorism. Pioneered by Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers, it emphasizes human potential, free will, and the importance of self-actualization. Humanists believe that individuals are inherently good and possess an innate drive to grow and fulfill their potential. They focus on subjective experience, personal responsibility, and the unique qualities of each individual. This perspective rejects the deterministic views of previous schools, asserting that people have the capacity for self-direction and choice. It highlights the importance of meaning, values, and personal growth. Key concepts include Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which posits that basic needs must be met before higher-level psychological needs can be pursued, culminating in self-actualization. Carl Rogers introduced client-centered therapy, emphasizing unconditional positive regard, empathy, and congruence to facilitate personal growth. Humanistic psychology had a significant impact on therapy, education, and organizational development, promoting a more positive view of human nature. While praised for its focus on positive aspects of human experience, it has been criticized for its lack of empirical rigor and its subjective nature. Despite this, its influence on positive psychology and person-centered approaches remains strong. Major schools of thought. Cognitive. Cognitive psychology emerged in the mid-20th century, largely in response to the limitations of behaviorism, which ignored internal mental processes. This school focuses on how people think, perceive, remember, and learn. It views the mind as an information processor, much like a computer, actively taking in, organizing, and transforming information. Cognitive psychologists study mental processes such as attention, language, problem-solving, memory, and decision-making. They're interested in understanding the black box that behaviorists avoided, seeking to unravel the complex mechanisms of the mind. This perspective emphasizes the active role of the individual in constructing their reality. Key figures like Ulrich Neisser and Jean Piaget made significant contributions to cognitive psychology. Piaget's work on cognitive development in children, for instance, demonstrated how children's thinking processes evolve through distinct stages. The cognitive revolution led to the development of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which combines cognitive principles with behavioral techniques to address psychological disorders. While highly influential and empirically robust, cognitive psychology has been criticized for sometimes oversimplifying complex human emotions and motivations. Nevertheless, its scientific rigor and focus on measurable mental processes have made it a dominant force in contemporary psychology, influencing fields from artificial intelligence to education. Major schools of thought. Biological. The biological perspective, also known as biopsychology or neuroscience, examines the physiological basis of behavior and mental processes. It posits that our thoughts, feelings, and actions are ultimately rooted in our biology, particularly the brain, nervous system, genetics, and endocrine system. This approach investigates how brain structures, neurotransmitters, hormones, and genetic predispositions influence everything from mood and personality to learning and psychological disorders. Biological psychologists use advanced tools and techniques to study the intricate connections between the body and mind. They believe that understanding these biological underpinnings is crucial for a complete picture of human psychology. Research in biological psychology often involves studying brain damage, genetic influences on behavior, the effects of drugs on the nervous system, and the role of evolution in shaping human traits. Techniques such as fMRI, EEG, and PET scans, allow researchers to observe brain activity in real time. This perspective has led to significant breakthroughs in understanding and treating neurological and psychiatric conditions. For example, insights into neurotransmitter imbalances have informed treatments for depression and anxiety. While powerful, the biological perspective is sometimes criticized for reductionism, potentially overlooking the complex interplay of environmental and psychological factors. However, it remains a cornerstone of modern psychological science. Research methods in psychology. Overview: psychology as a science relies heavily on systematic research methods to gather empirical evidence and draw valid conclusions about mind and behavior. These methods provide a framework for asking questions, collecting data, analyzing results, and interpreting findings. Understanding research methods is crucial for evaluating psychological claims and conducting ethical studies. The choice of method depends on the research question, ethical considerations, and practical limitations. Researchers must carefully design their studies to minimize bias and ensure the reliability and validity of their measurements. This systematic approach distinguishes psychology from casual observation or anecdotal evidence. There are several primary types of research methods, each with its strengths and weaknesses. Descriptive methods, such as observation and case studies, aim to describe phenomena without manipulating variables. Correlational studies examine the relationships between variables but cannot establish cause and effect. Experimental methods are the only way to determine causality by manipulating an independent variable and measuring its effect on a dependent variable. Quasi-experimental designs are used when true random assignment is not possible. Each method serves a unique purpose in building a comprehensive understanding of psychological phenomena, contributing to the cumulative knowledge of the field. Research methods. Experimental design. Experimental design is considered the gold standard in psychological research for establishing cause and effect relationships. It involves manipulating one or more independent variables, IVs, to observe their effect on a dependent variable, DV, while controlling for other extraneous factors. Key elements include random assignment of participants to experimental and control groups, ensuring that groups are equivalent at the outset. The experimental group receives the treatment or manipulation, while the control group does not, serving as a baseline for comparison. This careful control allows researchers to confidently attribute any observed changes in the DV to the manipulation of the IV. Without random assignment, it is difficult to rule out alternative explanations for findings. Researchers must also consider potential biases, such as experimenter bias, where the researcher's expectations influence results, and participant bias, where participants' expectations influence their behavior. Blinding techniques, such as single-blind, participants unaware of group assignment, or double-blind, both participants and researchers unaware, are used to mitigate these biases. Ethical considerations are paramount, ensuring informed consent, minimizing harm, and maintaining confidentiality. While powerful, experiments can sometimes lack ecological validity, meaning their findings may not generalize well to real-world settings. However, their ability to isolate causal factors makes them invaluable for understanding fundamental psychological processes. Research methods. Correlational studies. Correlational studies examine the statistical relationship between two or more variables, determining if and how they vary together. Unlike experiments, correlational research does not involve manipulating variables. Instead, it measures existing variables as they naturally occur. The strength and direction of this relationship are expressed by a correlation coefficient, ranging from -1.00, perfect negative correlation, to +1.00, perfect positive correlation, with 0 indicating no correlation. A positive correlation means that as one variable increases, the other also tends to increase. A negative correlation means that as one variable increases, the other tends to decrease. This method is often used when experimental manipulation is unethical or impractical. While correlational studies can identify patterns and make predictions, a crucial limitation is that correlation does not imply causation. Just because two variables are related does not mean one causes the other. There might be a third, unmeasured variable influencing both, or the direction of causality could be reversed. For example, ice cream sales and drowning incidents might be positively correlated, but neither causes the other. Both are influenced by warm weather. Despite this limitation, correlational research is valuable for exploring complex relationships, generating hypotheses for future experimental research, and studying phenomena that cannot be ethically manipulated. It provides important insights into real-world associations. Research methods: observational and case studies. Observational research involves systematically watching and recording behavior in its natural setting without intervention. Naturalistic observation allows researchers to study behavior in its authentic context, providing high ecological validity. For example, observing children's play behavior in a playground can reveal natural social dynamics. Structured observation involves setting up a specific situation to observe behavior, often in a laboratory, but still without direct manipulation. The key is to be unobtrusive to avoid influencing the subject's behavior. This method is particularly useful for describing behavior and generating hypotheses, especially when experimental manipulation is not feasible or ethical. Careful coding and inter-rater reliability are crucial for objective data collection. Case studies involve an in-depth investigation of a single individual, group, or phenomenon. They typically involve collecting extensive data through interviews, observations, psychological tests, and archival records. Case studies are particularly valuable for studying rare conditions, unique individuals, or complex psychological phenomena that cannot be replicated in a laboratory. For instance, the study of Phineas Gage, who survived a severe brain injury, provided crucial insights into brain function. While offering rich, detailed information, case studies have limitations, including their lack of generalizability to wider populations and potential for researcher bias. Despite these, they can generate new theories and provide profound insights into specific psychological processes. Biological basis of behavior. Brain structure. The human brain is an incredibly complex organ, serving as the control center for all thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It is broadly divided into several major structures, each with specialized functions. The cerebrum, the largest part, is responsible for higher-level functions like language, memory, and conscious thought, and is divided into two hemispheres. The cerebellum, located at the back of the brain, coordinates voluntary movements and balance. The brainstem, connecting the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord, controls vital functions such as breathing, heart rate, and sleep. Understanding these structures is fundamental to comprehending how the brain orchestrates our existence. Each part works in concert to produce our complex mental and physical experiences. Within the cerebrum, 4 main lobes are identified: the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobes. The frontal lobe is involved in planning, decision-making, personality, and voluntary movement. The parietal lobe processes sensory information, including touch, temperature, and pain. The temporal lobe is crucial for hearing, memory, and language comprehension. The occipital lobe is primarily responsible for processing visual information. Damage to specific areas of these lobes can result in predictable deficits, highlighting their specialized roles. This intricate organization allows for the vast range of human cognitive and behavioral capabilities, demonstrating the brain's remarkable specialization and integration. Biological bases of behavior. Neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that transmit signals across a synapse from one neuron to another, playing a critical role in all aspects of our behavior and mental processes. They are released from the axon terminal of a presynaptic neuron and bind to receptors on the postsynaptic neuron, either exciting or inhibiting its activity. This electrochemical communication forms the basis of brain function, influencing everything from mood, sleep, and appetite to learning, memory, and motor control. Imbalances in neurotransmitter levels are often associated with various psychological disorders, highlighting their profound importance. Understanding their function is key to comprehending the biological underpinnings as mental life. Several key neurotransmitters have been identified, each with specific roles. Dopamine is involved in reward, motivation, and motor control, and its dysregulation is linked to Parkinson's disease and schizophrenia. Serotonin influences mood, sleep, appetite, and impulse control, with low levels often associated with depression. Acetylcholine is crucial for muscle contraction, learning, and memory, and its decline is seen in Alzheimer's disease. GABA is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter, reducing neural excitability, while glutamate is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter, involved in learning and memory. Norepinephrine is involved in alertness and arousal. The intricate balance and interaction of these chemicals are essential for healthy brain function. Sensation and perception. Sensation is the process by which our sensory organs and nervous system receive and represent stimulus energies from our environment. It involves the detection of physical energy by sense organs, which then transmit this information to the brain. This includes processes like vision, light waves, hearing, sound waves, touch, pressure, temperature, taste, chemical molecules, and smell, odor molecules. Sensation is a bottom-up process, starting with the raw data from sensory receptors and moving up to the brain for interpretation. It is the initial step in experiencing the world, providing the basic building blocks of our sensory reality. Without sensation, there would be no input for our minds to process. Perception is the process of organizing and interpreting sensory information, enabling us to recognize meaningful objects and events. It is a top-down process where our brain uses existing knowledge, expectations, and experiences to make sense of the raw sensory data. For example, while sensation detects light waves, perception allows us to recognize a face or read a word. Perception is highly subjective and influenced by individual factors, culture, and context. The interplay between sensation and perception allows us to construct a coherent and meaningful understanding of our surroundings. This distinction is crucial for understanding how we interact with the world and how our experiences shape our reality. Learning, classical and operant conditioning. Learning is a relatively permanent change in an organism's behavior or knowledge due to experience. Two fundamental forms of associative learning are classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, first described by Ivan Pavlov, involves associating two stimuli such that a neutral stimulus comes to elicit a response, originally caused by another stimulus. For example, a dog learns to salivate at the sound of a bell if the bell has been repeatedly paired with food. This process involves involuntary, automatic responses. The organism learns to anticipate events, demonstrating a powerful form of unconscious association. It is a passive form of learning where the learner does not control the outcome. Operant conditioning, developed by B.F. Skinner, involves associating a behavior with its consequences. Behaviors followed by desirable consequences, reinforcement, are more likely to be repeated, while behaviors followed by undesirable consequences, punishment, are less likely to be repeated. This form of learning involves voluntary behaviors and is driven by the organism's actions. For example, a rat learns to press a lever to receive food. Reinforcement can be positive, adding a desirable stimulus, or negative, removing an undesirable stimulus. Punishment can also be positive, adding an undesirable stimulus, or negative, removing a desirable stimulus. Operant conditioning is a powerful tool for shaping complex behaviors and has wide applications in education, therapy, and animal training. Memory, encoding, storage, retrieval. Memory is the capacity of the nervous system to acquire and retain information and skills. It is a fundamental cognitive process essential for learning, identity, and daily functioning. The process of memory involves three main stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is the initial process of transforming sensory information into a form that can be stored in memory, much like typing information into a computer. This can involve visual, acoustic, or semantic processing. Effective encoding is crucial for successful memory formation, as poorly encoded information is difficult to recall later. Attention plays a critical role in determining what information gets encoded. Storage is the process of maintaining encoded information in memory over time. Psychologists often describe memory in terms of different stores: sensory memory, briefly holding sensory information; short-term memory, STM, holding a limited amount of information for a short duration; and long-term memory, LTM, a vast and relatively permanent store of information. Retrieval is the process of accessing and bringing stored information back into conscious awareness. This can involve recall, example, answering an essay question, or recognition, example, identifying a correct answer from options. Factors like cues, context, and emotional state can significantly influence retrieval success. Memory is not a perfect recording. It is reconstructive and prone to errors and biases. Cognition, problem-solving and decision-making. Cognition encompasses all mental activities associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. Problem-solving and decision-making are two critical aspects of cognition that enable us to navigate the complexities of daily life. Problem-solving involves identifying a problem, generating potential solutions, evaluating those solutions, and implementing the best one. It often requires overcoming obstacles and finding novel approaches. This process can range from simple daily dilemmas to complex scientific challenges. Effective problem-solving relies on various cognitive strategies, including algorithms, step-by-step procedures, and heuristics, mental shortcuts. Understanding these processes helps us improve our ability to tackle challenges efficiently. Decision-making involves selecting among various alternatives, often under conditions of uncertainty. It is influenced by a multitude of factors, including logic, emotions, personal biases, and available information. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias or availability heuristic, can systematically distort our judgments and lead to suboptimal decisions. For example, people often overestimate the likelihood of vivid, easily recalled events. Understanding these biases is crucial for making more rational and effective choices. Both problem-solving and decision-making are iterative processes, often requiring feedback and adjustment. They are fundamental to human intelligence and adaptation, shaping our interactions with the world and our personal outcomes. Developmental psychology. Lifespan overview. Developmental psychology is the scientific study of how and why human beings change over the course of their life. Originally concerned with infants and children, the field has expanded to include adolescence, adult development, aging, and the entire lifespan. It examines physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional changes that occur from conception to death. Developmental psychologists seek to understand both universal patterns of development and individual differences, exploring the interplay of nature, genetics, and nurture, environment. Key questions include how language develops, how moral reasoning evolves, and how personality changes over time. This field provides crucial insights into human growth and adaptation. Major theories in developmental psychology include John Piaget's stages of cognitive development, Erik Erikson's stages of psychosocial development, and Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development. These theories provide frameworks for understanding the predictable sequences of change across the lifespan. Research methods in developmental psychology often involve longitudinal studies, tracking the same individuals over time, and cross-sectional studies comparing different age groups at one point. Understanding developmental processes is vital for parents, educators, clinicians, and policymakers, as it informs practices that promote healthy development and address challenges at various life stages. The field emphasizes that development is a continuous, lifelong process. Social psychology, group dynamics. Social psychology is the scientific study of how individuals' thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by the actual, imagined, or implied presence of others. It explores topics such as social perception, attitudes, conformity, obedience, prejudice, and aggression. Group dynamics, a core area within social psychology, examines how individuals behave within groups and how groups themselves function. It investigates phenomena like group cohesion, leadership, decision-making processes within groups, and the impact of group membership on individual identity. Understanding group dynamics is crucial for explaining collective behavior and improving teamwork in various settings. It sheds light on how social contexts shape our actions. Key concepts in group dynamics include social facilitation, improved performance on simple tasks in the presence of others, and social loafing, reduced effort when working in a group. Group polarization describes the tendency for groups to make decisions that are more extreme than the initial inclinations of their members. Groupthink occurs when a cohesive group's desire for harmony or conformity results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcome. The Stanford Prison Experiment and Milgram's obedience studies are classic examples of research that revealed the powerful influence of social roles and authority on individual behavior. These studies underscore the profound impact of social context on human actions and decisions. Personality theories. Personality refers to an individual's characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Personality theories attempt to explain the origins, development, and enduring nature of these unique patterns. There are several major perspectives on personality, each offering different insights into what makes us who we are. These theories help psychologists understand why people react differently to similar situations, and how individual differences emerge. They provide frameworks for assessing and describing personality traits, as well as for understanding the underlying motivations and conflicts that shape behavior. The study of personality is central to understanding individual uniqueness and consistency. Key theoretical approaches include psychodynamic theories. Example, Freud's emphasis on unconscious conflicts and early experiences. Humanistic theories. Example, Maslow's self-actualization, Rogers' self-concept. Traits theories. Example, the Big Five factors: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. And social cognitive theories. Example, Bandura's reciprocal determinism, emphasizing interaction between person, behavior, and environment. Each perspective offers valuable insights, though none fully explains the complexity of human personality. Trait theories, for instance, focus on identifying stable characteristics, while social cognitive theories highlight the role of learning and situational factors. The integration of these diverse perspectives provides a more comprehensive understanding of personality. Psychological disorders. Classification. Psychological disorders, also known as mental disorders, are conditions characterized by significant disturbances in thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that cause distress or impairment in daily functioning. Classification systems are essential tools for diagnosing, treating, and researching these disorders. They provide a common language for mental health professionals, facilitating communication and ensuring consistency in diagnosis. The most widely used classification systems are the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM, published by the American Psychiatric Association, and the International Classification of Diseases, ICD, published by the World Health Organization. These manuals list diagnostic criteria, symptoms, and prevalence rates for various disorders. Accurate classification is the first step towards effective intervention. The DSM-5, the current edition, organizes disorders into categories based on shared features and diagnostic criteria. For example, anxiety disorders are grouped together, as are mood disorders and psychotic disorders. While classification systems offer numerous benefits, including guiding treatment and research, they also face criticisms. Concerns include the potential for stigmatization, over-pathologizing normal human experiences, and the reliability and validity of certain diagnoses. Some argue that a categorical approach may not fully capture the spectrum and comorbidity of mental health conditions. Despite these debates, classification systems remain indispensable for advancing our understanding and management of psychological disorders, providing a structured approach to a complex field. Psychological disorders. Anxiety and mood. Anxiety disorders are a group of mental health conditions characterized by excessive, persistent fear and anxiety, and related behavioral disturbances. Unlike normal, transient anxiety, these disorders involve intense and prolonged feelings of dread or worry that significantly interfere with daily life. Common types include generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, characterized by chronic, excessive worry about everyday events. Panic disorder, involving recurrent, unexpected panic attacks. Social anxiety disorder, marked by intense fear of social situations. And phobias, which are irrational fears of specific objects or situations. These disorders often involve both psychological symptoms, for example, racing thoughts, and physical symptoms, for example, heart palpitations. Effective treatments often combine therapy and medication. Mood disorders, also known as affective disorders, primarily involve a disturbance in a person's emotional state. The most common mood disorders are major depressive disorder and bipolar disorder. Major depressive disorder is characterized by persistent sadness, loss of interest or pleasure in activities, changes in appetite or sleep, fatigue, and feelings of worthlessness or guilt. Bipolar disorder involves extreme mood swings that include emotional highs, mania or hypomania, and lows, depression. During manic episodes, individuals may experience elevated mood, increased energy, decreased need for sleep, and impulsive behavior. Both anxiety and mood disorders can be debilitating but are highly treatable with appropriate interventions, including psychotherapy, medication, and lifestyle changes. Early intervention is often key to better outcomes. Psychological disorders. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a severe and chronic mental disorder characterized by profound disruptions in thought, perception, emotion, and behavior. It typically emerges in late adolescence or early adulthood and affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. Symptoms are often categorized as positive, negative, and cognitive. Positive symptoms include hallucinations, sensory experiences without external stimuli, most commonly auditory. Delusions, fixed false beliefs, and disorganized thought and speech. These are positive because they represent an excess or distortion of normal functions. Schizophrenia significantly impairs daily functioning, including work, relationships, and self-care. It is a complex disorder with both genetic and environmental risk factors. Negative symptoms involve a reduction or absence of normal functions, such as diminished emotional expression, flat affect, lack of motivation, avolition, and reduced speech, alogia. Cognitive symptoms include difficulties with attention, memory, and executive functions, like planning and problem solving. These cognitive deficits can be particularly debilitating. Treatment for schizophrenia typically involves a combination of antipsychotic medication to manage positive symptoms and various forms of psychotherapy, social skills training, and supported employment to address negative and cognitive symptoms and improve overall functioning. Early diagnosis and comprehensive, integrated treatment are crucial for improving outcomes and quality of life for individuals living with schizophrenia. Therapeutic approaches. Psychotherapy, often simply called therapy, involves a trained therapist and a client working together to address psychological problems and improve mental well-being. There are numerous therapeutic approaches, each based on different theoretical perspectives, but all share the common goal of helping individuals understand themselves better and develop coping strategies. Therapy provides a safe and confidential space for individuals to explore their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The effectiveness of therapy depends on various factors, including the client's motivation, the therapist's skill, and the therapeutic relationship itself. It is a collaborative process aimed at fostering personal growth and alleviating distress. Major therapeutic approaches include psychodynamic therapy, exploring unconscious conflicts, humanistic therapy, focusing on self-actualization and personal growth, behavioral therapy, using conditioning principles to change maladaptive behaviors, and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, addressing dysfunctional thoughts and behaviors. CBT is particularly widely used and empirically supported for a range of disorders. Group therapy, family therapy, and couples therapy are also common modalities. In some cases, psychotherapy is combined with psychopharmacology, medication, for a more comprehensive treatment plan. The choice of therapeutic approach is often tailored to the individual's specific needs, preferences, and the nature of their psychological concerns, highlighting the personalized nature of mental health care.